Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Danielle Lawrence, the marketing specialist here at Davin. On behalf of the entire team, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to our webinar, The Cloud Goes Wild, Migrating to the Cloud Using Microsoft Azure. Thank you so much for joining us. So I know we're all really looking forward to the content today, so I'll jump straight into it. To get us started, I'll pass on to Caroline Atching, our account executive and lead generation specialist.
Thanks for the intro, Danielle. Good morning, everyone, once again, and thank you for joining us today. At any time during the event, you can use the dedicated chat to ask your questions. We will be answering them throughout the session, and if our team's input is required further, we will reserve those queries for the end of the presentation. As always, our session is being recorded today, and we will be sending it to all attendees in the coming days. And at this point, I will get Lau, our cloud engineer, to get us started. Lau, whenever you're ready to go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So my name is Lau Woodley, and I'll be your presenter today. And I hope you enjoy what we have for you here today. Our agenda will follow a light intro into Azure and its core concepts. We'll also touch on the recurring narrative of the pain points we've seen in engagements with our customers thus far. We'll also touch on how does one choose from the myriad of products within Azure. How do you match your on-prem technologies with the cloud counterpart? And we'll also discuss a strategic approach to the cloud adoption journey and the best ways to ensure that you are successful in your endeavors. So what is Azure? Microsoft Azure is a platform with more than 200 products and services designed to help bring new solutions to life. These solutions are designed in a way to help solve business challenges of present and of future. We can build, we can run, and can manage applications across multiple clouds, on-prem included. And Azure produces tools and frameworks that would allow us to manage these multiple clouds. Simply put, cloud computing is a delivery of computing services that inclusive of servers, storage, networking, software, and even business intelligence or analytics, which is accessible over the internet, quote unquote, the cloud, to offer faster innovation, flexible resources, and economies of scale. So what is it that makes of this cloud? What is this cloud made of, right? So the cloud, Azure, is mostly made up of these three particular service models. So to the left, we have a technology stack that represents our on-premises deployment model. The cloud here, it speaks to the majority of the components or building blocks. Basically, their foundation can be found within these three service models: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. The color differences here represent where responsibility lays for the management of the underlying components. As you can see, some are managed by Microsoft, some are managed by you, the customer. So what is infrastructure as a service? Well, to be quite simple, it's really, it's the most basic and familiar of the cloud services. It basically offers the essential compute, storage, and networking on demand. We pay for these services as we need them, which in the Azure terms we call pay as you go. And some of the familiar recognizable traits of the infrastructure as a service would be, it's very similar to virtual machines that we've worked with prior. Workloads can be, or on-prem workloads can be lifted and shifted very simply onto the infrastructure as a service platform within Azure. And workloads that are sitting on infrastructure as a service can also be automated for starting and stopping. It must be noted that of the three major service models within Azure, infrastructure as a service is the only service model that we can turn off. So some of the common benefits would be the familiar management experience and the simple adoption model, which is why infrastructure as a service is still common and a de facto standard within the cloud offerings. Next up, we have platform as a service. And you would notice that right off the bat, there are only two aspects of this particular technology stack is available to be managed by the customer. an example of the platform as a service. Generally, most people are not clear what they are, but in Azure, you have two very good examples: the Azure Web App Service or Web Services, Azure App Service Plan, or the Azure SQL Database. So basically, a platform as a service, it's basically allows you access to resources that you can deliver sophisticated cloud-enabled enterprise applications, or even custom applications and services that you can develop. And basically, the cloud service provider, and in this instance, the cloud service provider is not Darwin. Darwin is a cloud solution provider, and the cloud service provider is Microsoft. So we're clear on that, right? So Azure Web Apps basically is a developer environment where we host our web applications, but we don't have to access the operating systems nor the underlying virtual machines. We only manage applications and data. How this benefits the organization? Well, it cuts the coding time down tremendously. Developers don't have to code every component of the solution with these past services coming with components built in, such as workflows, directory services, sometimes security services, and search. So it's a complete development and deployment environment in the cloud. And platform as a service, the major aspect here that we'd like to remember is that we only manage applications and data. Software as a service, it's the easiest model to utilize. It's the fastest deployment model in terms of time to market. Simplest to use. SaaS allows users to connect and use cloud-based apps over the internet. Basically, customers only having to pay for license or subscription. Common examples would be M365, Microsoft Cloud for collaboration and communication, Teams, Office, OneDrive. These are all examples of SaaS. One important paradigm shift to consider is in an on-premises data center, we generally own the entire technology stack and are responsible for managing the entire stack. As you move to the cloud and we employ some of these modern service models, the customer is always responsible because this digital real estate is owned by the customer. It's not owned by the CSP, cloud solution provider, or cloud service provider. The customer owns their data and identities, and the customer is always responsible for protecting the security of their data and identities. On-premises resources and cloud components also fall within the management of the customer, and there are some services that vary by type. But regardless of the deployment type, we would like to be clear that the following responsibilities are always retained by the customer: data, endpoints, accounts, and access management. So now that we've gotten through the identification of why, how can Azure help us, let's talk about why we would choose Azure. And this slide here tries to summarize Microsoft's accolades in terms of these certifications. Azure is the most certified of the three cloud solutions, the big public clouds. Basically, Azure allows organizations to take advantage of more than 100 compliance certifications. These 100 certifications include 50 specific to global regions like the EU and the UK, and more than 35 of these 100 are also specific to key industries like health, or government, or finance. Yeah. Support for ISO 27001 and PCI DSS are all things that are supported within Azure. So how and when does an organization consider it's time to adopt cloud technologies? How do you know now is the right time to adopt? So let's help you kind of frame where these things take us. So the on-premises servers are out of date. Usually on-prem servers are managed in a lifespan of 3 to 5 years. That's a capital investment that we try to maximize our return on investment on. And usually that would mean purchase of an extended warranty, or we may say some extra prayers, hoping that the hardware survives for as long as possible. But even if the age of the hardware is not an issue, and that does not lead you towards considering cloud technologies, maybe struggling to scale, maybe the age-old platform is alive, it works, we can't purchase any new parts for it anymore, but it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, then we may come into another scenario where aspects of our business might develop. We might be expanding into new territories. We might be developing new business projects, new models. And our existing infrastructure now needs to facilitate and to provide the necessary platform services to our business. Scaling may be an issue, right? Also, deployment times, maybe we have the capacity, maybe we have the hardware, but there are some tweaks that we need to get. We need to purchase some extra hard drives, maybe we need to fly the engineers in. And this all negatively affects the deployment time. Time is money, and the longer it takes to get to the market, potential money is lost, right? Maybe we are not brand new to the cloud. Maybe we have already adopted a SaaS platform for email and communication. Maybe we have been using some other types of services from the cloud, like backup and some sort of other types of services. And we don't know where else or how else the cloud can assist. All these are viable reasons, again, to reach out to your CSP and say, hey, we think we need to understand what's going on. Pandemic is affecting us. The model of the business is changing. We need to work in a more flexible way, something that we anticipated to be. We didn't need to change it within 3 to 5 years. Something in the business has changed, and now we have new dynamic constraints. These are all valid reasons to consider cloud technologies. These are valid reasons why cloud technologies were created to address these types of business concerns. And coming up here, last but not least, would be, what does the cloud have to offer in terms of BYOD policies, managing external devices? Now, to summarize and to tie all of these pieces of the puzzle into a clearer picture here, we have invented a fictitious company. We call them Financial Consultants Ltd, who has presented to Davin particular pain points. He is interested in utilizing cloud technologies. Mr. CIO here has already moved his business to M365, utilizing cloud email, Teams, and that kind of thing. But aging hardware, no disk space available, and a present business unit that is going in a different direction. We are now poised with having to create or utilize existing solutions within Azure to provide necessary coverage here to our customers. So how do we go about doing this? Well, off the bat, and to make the conversation shorter, we suggested hybrid identity, Azure File Sync, Azure Backup, maybe possibly Azure SQL, and some Azure VMs as possible products within Azure real estate that would bring value to our friends at Financial Consultants Ltd. But not just value, satisfy and exceed their existing requirements. So considering that they're already on the M365 platform, we know that FCL has access to email and chat, Teams, and some storage, some online storage through SharePoint, dependent on the SKU that they have, or through OneDrive. But does this in itself enable an organization to be totally work from home? Well, no. We all know that there are some other services outside of those stated here that are required and critical to day-to-day business operations. So we now enter into the conversation about hybrid identity and access management. So why are we here? Well, hybrid identity is a very critical aspect, or the identity is the critical aspect to access control and management. In the cloud world, we now have hybrid identity, which basically is a terminology used to describe the synchronization of an on-prem identity with a cloud identity. And basically, your users now have one common identity or login account, right? An identity here refers to an email address, a username and password. How the account we use to access the organization's digital resources. So why would we consider hybrid identity as a thing? Well, it should be one of the first considerations for cloud technology integration. This solution creates common identity for authentication and authorization to all resources, regardless of its location. And by synchronizing this on-prem identity with Azure AD, which is the cloud-based identity and management platform in Azure, FCL can leverage the cloud tools and services more seamlessly because they're already cloud, right? Remember, they have M365 already, so they're kind of cloud. They have some cloud, and we want to now leverage the existing platforms to create seamless solutions for them moving forward. And the way to do that would be, one, ensure that they have a simplified identity management solution. So we enter into the hybrid identity and proposing this to our customer. So that will deal with our identity. The other constraint was Mr. CIO had failing tape drive, and he also ran out of on-prem storage capacity. So first things first, we would deal with the disaster recovery scenario first, as we can never plan for failure. So implementing coverage of his critical workloads and files would have been the priority here, getting a product in place to ensure that he can recover from the disaster if it were to strike. We chose Azure Backup here. Now, Azure Backup is a service that provides a simple, secure, and cost-effective solution to back up your data on-prem, right, to the Azure cloud. And in this instance, we are leveraging, FCL is leveraging the Azure Backup ability to protect on-premise files and folders through the Azure Backup agent. Due to space constraints, recovering from the backup vault may not be possible on-prem. So it is possible to recover to the cloud, but there is another caveat there. The process of recovering to the cloud and then moving the data back to on-prem, dependent on the capacity or size or footprint of the data, that may be a time-consuming process. Mr. CEO has more requirements. He also wants a recovery time objective, right? Could be less than 30 minutes. At this point, Azure Backup does not, in its present methodology, cannot provide Mr. CIO with that RTU of less than 30 minutes. So we, with our understanding and coverage of FCL's internal IT infrastructure, Darwin also recognized that we can utilize another cloud product called Azure File Sync. So Azure File Sync would simply centralize the organization's file shares into the cloud, right, using this storage sync service. And this storage sync service now, it's part of a platform as a service offering. So basically, we don't manage the sync service, we just set it up. And we then tell it, do we want to keep a full copy of the data locally on a Windows server? And this would be the entirety of your file share. Or do we want to just keep a quick cache of that 2.5 terabytes of corporate data. So at this junction here with the introduction of Azure File Sync, Mr. CIO is now posed with a flexible option here where we can come in and deploy this Azure File Sync service into his environment, have Azure File Sync replicate all of his corporate files off of his on-prem Windows server into this storage account in Azure, and have his front-end clients access the Windows server through regular protocols like SMB, NFS, and FTP. So we're not changing how our consumers of the data access this data, whilst we have transformed the entirety of the service and made it now a hybrid/cloud service. We have just bumped its availability up to 99.9%. It is now accessible from anywhere in the world, and we can now provide backup from the cloud to this service, which sounds like a great deal. Because this uses replication technology and it deals with files on a file level, the ability to restore files and meet the recovery time objective is now met. And later on in the demo, we'd like to show you guys how quick this service actually works. There's also another point to note here. You can have as many as these caches distributed across the world. So for the multinational organizations, maybe you work throughout multiple territories. Maybe you have multiple or one territory, multiple sites within the territory. The concept and the topological architecture does not change. And we can adopt the architecture to suit the best case deployment method for your environment. So far we have hybrid identity. We have introduction of the Azure File Service to manage the file shares. So we like to mention Azure Site Recovery Services here only because it's another product within the disaster recovery and business continuity services offering of Microsoft Azure. But unfortunately, in this particular instance, Azure Site Recovery Services will not be the ideal product for FCL. And we'll get into a little bit of why. So site recovery basically is a site replication service. And basically, it's designed to keep the business running and keep the apps within the business running, the workloads continually running during outages at the primary site. Site recovery basically replicates these workloads that are running in your on-premises environment, whether they be on physical servers or virtual machines, and they replicate them to a secondary site, which would be your warm site, or it can be replicated to Azure, which could also be considered a warm site. When these outages occurs at your primary site, you can fail over to the secondary site and access the services from there. If your primary site has returned to functional level, we can also fail back. So point to note here again, the reason why the ASR was not selected as the product for FCR is because this ASR product requires an appliance to be deployed on-prem to support its function, and our friends at FCL did not have available storage capacity on-prem, and expanding was an issue considering the age of the hardware. So we chose to do Azure Backup and a combination of other products to meet the business needs. Last but not least, we can fail over and fail back in between our hot and warm sites under Azure Site Recovery Services. Two other services we'd like to mention here as a great value to organizations would be some fully managed services built within the infrastructure of Microsoft Azure. So we first have the skill sets. So what is a skill set? A virtual machine skill set basically allows us to group and manage a group of these VMs who are now load balanced. So it's basically we've created a group of VMs all with similar models, similar processor, memory, disk, network. And we have one particular service that's running on this VM. Let's say this workload is, and its home is most ideal on infrastructure as a service VMs. And over time, we've recognized that the performance that we require out of this workload, it sits better on virtual machines. So we deployed virtual machine scale sets, which basically load balance a group of virtual machines and allows you to scale this group of machines vertically or horizontally as your demand requires. Key points to note about the scale sets is that this resiliency and load balancing would also work across availability zones and data centers within the Azure real estate. Azure App Service Plan. So this is also another platform as a service product that offers very flexible and almost automated scalability. The App Service Plan is the fully hosted development environment we mentioned earlier. And these app services allow us to select the technology stack that we'd like deployed on top of them. And whether it be Linux, whether it be NoSQL, Java, PHP, HTML5, we could then select the application stack, we can select the operating system stack, and Microsoft then manages everything else below, including monitoring, insights, and high availability. So basically the value of these two products here is that they automatically increase and decrease in response to demand. And we thought it would be a worthwhile mention here that these products do exist and we can employ these technologies to benefit our customers. So the question is, how did our recommendations and our overall solution benefit our friends at SCL? So on the left, we'd have their existing technologies or the technologies that they had prior to moving or adapting to the cloud. On-prem Active Directory domain server, we would then replicate with a virtual machine in the cloud. Reason for this, there's a level of disaster recovery that is provided by virtual machines in Azure, as mentioned before, more than 3 nines worth of uptime. This type of resilience and scalability far outweighs the value or the cost of providing similar functions on-prem. And what we recommend here is that we use your ADDS VM in the cloud as the starting point to create your hybrid identity. So we build using the new modern technologies so that our customers can benefit mostly from the economies of scale, the efficient cost at which it is to run these elements of the digital environment, and the immense benefit there are to moving forward in terms of new products and services for organization. So this is a high-level overview of our steps that we took. So we first hybridized the identity. We synchronized our user local account and the cloud account. We then migrated the file services from the on-prem server to the Azure File Sync. For the Sage accounting workload, SCL Consultants Ltd have been experiencing growth in the HR department, and as such, they required a couple more staff members in the accounts receivable department. They being the chief stakeholders and the use case for the Sage accounting, they thought it best that they had a remote desktop services set up in Azure, which would allow more than 5 of their account receivable reps to access Sage Accounting now remotely, simultaneously. So again, this is the capability of the platform expanding to meet the business needs on the fly. And we move forward now to the other platforms that existed. So to support the HR and payroll business, the FCL started building their own custom application. Traditionally, it was sitting on a virtual machine within the on-premises environment. But now with the opportunity to move to Azure, we were able to show the benefits of what refactoring is. And refactoring is just another terminology we use in migrating to the cloud. And it basically refers to breaking a part of an application. You know, the applications, enterprise applications more so, come in tiers, right? Tier 1 or tier 2, they have a front end, they have a database, they may have storage separated from that stack. So basically what we've done is we've looked at the future requirements of FCL here. We've recognized that the existing platform sitting on that virtual machine, even though it might be a low-risk migration path into the cloud on an infrastructure as a service VM, a VM may not adequately service this new growth experiencing on the HR department. So we thought it best to decouple or refactor this HR and PR application where we separated the front end into a web app, which now sits on App Service Plan, right? And the database aspect of it will now go into the Azure SQL database, which both are platform as service offerings to Azure. And if we remember, those platform as a service, we only manage our data and access to the data. All right. So basically, this is an overview of how we have transitioned financial consultants from an on-prem. So this would be their stage cloud adoption journey. And now that we've identified the workloads from the on-prem and how we can move them to the cloud, now we know where we are putting them in the cloud. We can now determine with the stakeholders what is the best time frame to make this migration to ensure that the impact to the organization is least as possible. Now, in moving or in proposing the cloud or the Azure solution here to FCL, we have been successful in increasing the uptime capability of every component within the digital real estate to at least 99.9% uptime. We have now allowed all of the services to be accessible from anywhere in the world. And we now have the flexibility, scalability, and the robust foundation of the Azure platform to use as our building block going forward for SCL. So now that we've discussed the high-level overview of how we assisted with FCL and their pain points, how do you, my fellow customers in the audience, how do you embark upon your cloud journey? And well, you're in the right place. You reach out to Davin. You know why you want to choose Azure, because it's the most cloud certified platform available. We know that we could provide not only 3 nines worth of uptime, but we can extend some services to as much as 4 and 5 nines. The learning platform where we can gather skills and knowledge about Azure is also free and available. So engage with your trusted CSP and get your conversation going. We would also like to introduce to you the Cloud Adoption Framework. Now, this is a toolkit or framework created by Microsoft that manages the entire life cycle of the journey, the cloud journey, or the journey to the cloud for the customer. This framework is like a de facto tool for architects, IT professionals, and business decision makers. This really allows the organization to better align the business and the technical strategies to making your cloud journey a successful one, right? And the conversation of tools, there is also Microsoft is heavy on creating and updating tooling. Just as a little FYI, the upgrade part for products within the cloud is 30 to 90 days, 60 to 90 days. So basically what that means is that within a 90-day period, you can experience updates, new features, new product capabilities from services that you are using every day. All right, so Azure Migrate is one such tool that Microsoft has now made available to the public. And Azure Migrate is a platform as a service tool that provides a simplified migration, modernization, and optimization service to get your workloads into Azure. So pre-migration, we use the Azure Migrate tool to create discovery initiatives where it seeks out to identify major components and workloads within the environment. It will then perform an assessment on these workloads, identifying peak usage times, off-peak times, IOPS on your storage, bandwidth required, and it will then do right sizing. So what is right sizing? Right sizing is where the tool would then look at the workload and the requirements on-prem. It will also then try to find the best suitable platform or service model within Azure that would host those particular workloads based on the characteristics coming out of the assessment. This assessment usually runs for a period of time where it collates the statistical information so it could better give you a higher rating on the assessment. So this Azure Migrate is really an extensible framework that allows for integration of third-party tools as well. So not just the Azure Migrate, which is the Microsoft migration tool, but you also have access to third-party tools that can be integrated right into Azure. And those tools bring different value by expanding the scope of your supported use cases. So maybe you might be migrating some open source platform or something that may not be readily supported by the Azure Migrate tool. There may be a third-party tooling out there offered by the actual third-party vendor. You are able to, from your Azure portal, engage with these tools if they're available through the portal, and now open up your opportunities for moving your workloads into the cloud. Another tool like we'd like to mention here is Microsoft Learn, which is completely free, online, available to anyone who has interest to learn about the Microsoft products. You can grow your skills, build and manage, learn how to manage applications, how to build applications, how to build workloads in the cloud, how to build workloads on-prem, or even at the edge. Right? There are hands-on training labs. There are tons of documentation. Any documentation that we need to use that would validate a configuration, validate the requirements, you can find them within the Microsoft Learn documentation repository. One important point to note, even Microsoft's professional certification exams, all of the exams and the questions or the content that you require to know comes from Microsoft Learn. So it's important to know that you can access training, certification, or general understanding and knowledge about the Microsoft Azure platform from the Microsoft Learn. So now, after I bored you with all that PowerPoint and talking, I'd like to introduce you to the Azure portal and to a mock demo lab that we have created to kind of highlight some of the technologies that FCL, or Financial Consultants Ltd, our friend Mr. CIO, what he has deployed, and basically the functionality that he can now experience by employing Microsoft Azure and cloud technologies. So Excuse me while I switch my screens. All right. So the Azure portal. The Azure portal is the web interface and the de facto management interface for Microsoft Azure. To some, it may be daunting, it may be confusing. I'd like to demystify some of these simple concepts on how to navigate and some of the basic features and functions of the Azure portal. So first off, this is our landing page, and it basically just has a cache of services that we would have accessed recently. There are a couple of key things to note here. This search to the top is your friend. You can use it to quickly access by name any of the Microsoft products that are available within the tenant, as well as the hamburger menu all the way to the left here also gives you a full list of favorite resources, as well as you can come over to the all services view. So in our environment here, what do we have? So we have a couple of virtual machines that represents our domain controllers. We have storage sync service that represents the PaaS service that manages FCL's Azure File Sync deployment, and this is the VM that is registered to synchronize. We also have storage accounts, which will act as the repository for our files and folders from on-prem, right? And I'm basically walking you through navigating the different aspects of the solution from Azure portal. And again, all of these tools can be found by simply searching using the keyword searches, or you can go to your hamburger menu, all services, and then find them here within the full gamut list. And you can then make them favorites. Within the dashboard, within the Azure portal, there's also the ability to use dashboards. The dashboards are basically simple workbooks, which are basically pre-configured triggers and alerts that come together here and provide you with a seemingly single pane of glass overview of your infrastructure and your digital and the elements that make up your digital real estate. These are just some basic standard built-in widgets that you can peruse to gain simple oversight of your infrastructure as it pertains to your present configuration. I would also like to touch on cost analysis. How do you know what your solution costs? So we like to demo here two views. This particular view is when it can be accessed from within the Azure portal, and it usually shows the running costs of your elements within the digital real estate. My selection was based on subscription. Of course, there's only one subscription here. And then I drilled down to resource group. Right, we selected resource groups here as a filter for our pricing information. While this loads, it gives us an overview of per resource group, the overall cost as it stands now, an average per day, and the total. These are all created by the platform insights automatically. We can also drill down into the resource group to get a granular look into the actual components and what they've cost for this billing period. Right. And one other thing I'd like to show you before we move on to the demo would be the pricing calculator, which is Microsoft's website for creating bill of materials. Your bill of materials would be your digital real estate and all of the components that we would have configured within your digital real estate. I went ahead and created this bill of materials to give an overview of what our solution to Financial Consultants Limited would look like from a monthly cost perspective. And these prices are all in US. And this is what it would look like on a monthly basis, $698.14. Right? Just switching back here, I'd like to show you that on the price calculator, you do have the option to configure variable options within the technical components. It does take a bit getting accustomed to, but the services that you're familiar with, or if you're unfamiliar with, you can use the information icon here to take you away to the myriad of documentation that Microsoft has for you to get up to date on purchase options, how to have it deployed, technical documentation. And these are available for all products that are within your bill of materials on your price calculator. You can go ahead and create an account, and this allows you to save estimates. Right? These are considered an estimate. And you can also export or share these costings with your team members or external parties. For instance, a customer may come to a pricing calculator and they may create their own bill of materials and be interested. They might want it vet by an architect or an engineer. They could share such a bill of materials with Davin, CSP, and it would produce a URL that you can then send to your. So I need to log in. Let's skip that for now. So the Azure portal. So we have gone over costing. What else can we see? Okay, so Azure also provides access to Azure Active Directory, which, as mentioned prior, this is a platform as a service identity management solution hosted in Azure. And to create the hybrid identity, this is the tool or the product that we utilized to synchronize our on-premises users with our cloud accounts. So basically what we have here are some demo accounts created for the intent of this presentation. Key points to note here, unlike Active Directory on-prem, Azure Active Directory does give you some advantages in we can add external parties or invite external parties straight into our security domain and without having to manage their accounts. You can see the identity here. It says external Azure AD, which basically means these users have been invited from another M365 Azure AD. And we can also apply groups. We can apply licenses. We can apply administrative rules, we can use groups, our security groups, to assign licenses or to control access. Basically, the Azure AD interface gives you very similar management capabilities as compared to on-prem, with a couple of nuanced differences that we need to just pay attention to. So I'd like to go over here. We do have a couple of identities that have been synced from on-prem. So on-premises sync enable means that these accounts were not created within the cloud, but more so created on-prem from within our Active Directory and then synchronized to Azure AD, creating one identity. All right. Just switching over to our on-prem Active Directory server. This gives you a view of where these accounts really live. Peter Parker, this is an account that sits on-prem. All right. It sits within Active Directory, yet we can access this account and give him rules that or assign him to groups that only exist within Azure Active Directory. And dependent on your Azure Active Directory version, because it comes in a free version and a paid version, we can also append or add on more security features to this present directory management solution. This is the first step. This allows FCL to then take their on-prem accounts and give them access and control over cloud resources, which is ideal. They now use M365 and they're now adopting Azure technologies. So now let's move over to what it looks like to have Azure File Sync working for your organization. So this machine represents our on-prem machine. We have here a file share. All right, we have a file share that's just named file share 2. And basically we have some folders here that represents our on-prem file and folder structure, our corporate storage repository, as you may. So what we'd like to do is show that on the cloud side, there's equal architecture. All right, so we go over to the cloud environment. Let's look for the storage sync service. We find how our Azure File Sync is configured. It uses the storage sync service. We go over to the sync service here. We see that our sync group is green, it's healthy. And we do have some metrics here. It shows us files that were synced from the on-prem, the path that we're syncing to the cloud, the server that is registered, and we can get granular details over what is actually happening between our cloud environment and the on-prem environment. Now, the sync service in the cloud represents two components. There's the sync service and then there's the storage account. The storage account represents the placeholder where the data actually sits. And this sits within a file share in a storage account. And this is me just showing you how we use our Azure portal to navigate through these technologies. So our file share webinar lab maintains the same folder structure as our on-prem share. So now we'd like to just give an example of how quick this actually synchronizes. So that was in general stuff. And you can see this is in Azure. This is our cloud storage account, and we now have new rich text document available. Basically, this works as a replication service. The Azure File Sync service will then manage access to the files on your front-end server, which will be your Windows server. And we can deploy this front-end server to as many server endpoints as we need, which basically creates a very resilient, a very robust file storage architecture, and it alleviates the storage constraints that we would have been experiencing on-prem with our Mr. CIO pain points. Basically, that's what we had identified here today to show you guys, and that kind of brings us to the end of the demo. We'd like to now move on to the question and answer segment, where we'd like to open the floor and you guys could shoot questions at us. So, how can Darwin